So I am sorry that I'm not here with you today or there with you today. When I originally scheduled my to be absent today, I was going to be. It was supposed to be a B day, but it's not. So what I'm going to do is I've left you, as you can see, some directions of things to do. But I did want to kind of introduce with you the progressive movement. Via a slideshow. And for some of you, this will feel just like normal, like you were sitting at home and I'm talking. And though I wish we had that little interaction, but we don't. But we can definitely have that on Wednesday when we get back together. Okay. And so I just do a real short introduction about the progressive movement. You've read in your book, you've read for homework about the progressive movement and some of the ideas that were there. And when I think about the progressive movement, what I really think about is I think about back to the Gilded Age and some of those issues that came up with the Gilded Age, and the progressive movement is fixing those. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Of course, one of the biggest progressive presidents during that time was Teddy Roosevelt. So after he took over from McKinley in 1901, after McKinley was shot, we talked about that he comes in and he makes some really big moves when it comes to foreign policy with his big stick diplomacy and building the Panama Canal, the Great White Fleet, and just really, exercising a lot of muscle in the Caribbean and Latin America. But those changes aren't just going to be aren't just going to be foreign changes. There are going to be lots of domestic changes that he is going to help to make. And that's the thing, is he doesn't do it by himself. There are lots of parts and pieces to making this work. Okay. And that's what, part of the progressive area is. He doesn't wait until his election in 1904 to start this. He goes ahead as soon as he gets into office. But in 1904, he is elected in his own right with the largest popular and electoral margin in history. You can see the electoral map there. You notice that the whole South is blue. And remember, we had a name for that. I'm waiting. Yes, it was the Solid South. So this is after the Democrats came back into control after the end of Reconstruction, and they remain in control. So that is a very great example of the Solid South. So even though he wins so much of the rest of the country by a very large margin, the South is still solidly Democrat. Okay, so he wins that and then begins to transform the presidency through the press. He holds daily press briefings. He's photographed in action, and he is like the action hero of his time. And he also said that this 1904 election, he would consider to be his second term and not really run again. Now, at that time, they were not, there was not the impetus that you could only run for 2 terms. But he said he would consider this his second term, okay, because he had served from 1901, most of McKinley's second term. And so he says he considers this his second term, and that he won't run again. Now, he is going to live to regret this, and we'll talk about that later. Okay. And so what made Teddy Roosevelt so different? I mean, why was he this different kind of guy? And I think the biggest thing is he wanted to see change happen, and he was willing to work for it. And he, for the first time, was going to help to make the government work for it. And so it wasn't just on the backs of, of everyday people, and a lot of whom were a lot of times middle-class educated women. He said it is time for the government to start working to help the people. And that is where we get the term progressive movement, when it's the government who is helping to make these changes. Okay. But how do people buy into that? What is it that causes people to move for that change? What is it that gets people off the couch, that gets them moving towards seeing change happen? And I just really think about what y'all have lived through in the last 2 years with so much change happening, with people getting off the couch and going out and protesting and working for change, being on the boots on the ground, so to say, of getting things done. And why is that? And I think that this right here is it. Now, these are black and white. These don't in today's world carry the same weight as what we see on Instagram and on Snapchat and on our phones. But it is seeing those pictures, seeing those lives impacted, that I really think is what makes people move. I mean, to watch that video of George Floyd get his neck, kneeled on for 8 minutes. That's what makes people get up off the couch and seek change. And in the early 1900s, this was it. Seeing these young children working in factories, seeing on the previous slide, seeing the living conditions that they were living in, seeing that this is how the immigrants lived, seeing children in poverty, seeing these horrible conditions, it's what moves people, to really change and want to work for something better. I think that we have definitely seen it in our lives and in our, and especially in the last couple of years. And that same thing was true in the 1900s. When you see these images, when you see these pictures, when you see pictures of young ladies laid out dead on the sidewalk in New York City on a beautiful spring day because they had to jump to their deaths to avoid being burned alive, as their place of business, the place that they worked, was on fire and they were locked in. It is these kinds of images. It is these kinds of images that make people move. These images right here are from one of the largest industrial catastrophes that our country has ever seen. And in fact, it was the largest industrial catastrophe until 9/11. And 9/11 wasn't industrial necessarily, but this was the largest catastrophe that we had seen. These women working at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City, jumping to their deaths to avoid being burned. Okay? This is what makes people move. So the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, 150, somewhere between 146 to 150 young women trapped on the 10th floor of their building because it was locked. And they hurled themselves to their deaths. When people saw these pictures, they said something has to be done. Something has to be done about these despicable working conditions that people are having to endure. So the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, even though it does happen in 1911, which is into a little bit the progressive era, I still feel like, for me, and I think for a lot of people, this was the event. This is what woke people up. This is what made people realize something has to be done. We have to rein in this laissez-faire government that lets business owners do whatever they want to make a profit. And we have to rein that in and do something to protect the everyday workers, the everyday Americans. And that's where your progressive era begins. Okay. And for me, it's the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. It's what made people move. Okay. So a couple of things. You are going to do a activity with the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in class today. So that is actually today's classwork, not homework. It is your classwork. You're going to read the obituary from one of the last survivors of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, and you're also going to watch a video to give you to learn a little bit more about this terrible, terrible thing. You're going to do some pre-reading and analyzing sources and things like that to learn a little bit more about this disaster. And there's a link with all of the directions and everything on Canvas. Okay, but this is just one of the events, or to me, in my mind, this is one of the major events that does spark that progressive movement. And you read about it in your text for homework. You read about the progressive movement, and really, it was all about curing the ills that happened because of that rapid industrialization. You had the Gilded Age and all of this huge industrialization with your moneymakers, with your captains of industry, but on the backs of everyday laborers. workers. And so the progressive era is here. The progressive movement happens to fix that, to reduce that uneven balance of wealth. To reform the politics and to remove that corruption of Tammany Hall and of your political machines, and to make sure that the everyday American is being protected. And also improving lives of the poor by improving personal behavior. This, ladies and gentlemen, is when we are going to get the 18th Amendment, where they were with the prohibition of alcohol. This is when we are going to work closer and closer to the 19th Amendment and women getting the right to vote. And so the progressive era was just this amazing time where so many things were happening, where you had your everyday people working to make change happen and to make people's lives better. Okay. Now, of course, not everybody thought this was a great thing, especially, of course, your captains of industry. But there were lots of people who did. And actually, Teddy Roosevelt gives these people who work for the change a term, and it's called, and I'm actually going to fast forward here just a little bit. I should have put that slide in a different place, but he calls them muckrakers. That was a term given by Teddy Roosevelt to those people who wrote about and exposed those social wrongs. And so muckraker actually kind of has almost a negative connotation, but they were the people who went out and found and exposed all those bad things that were happening. Those bad things like child labor, those bad things like unsafe working conditions, those bad things like alcoholism, lynching, women's rights, political reform when it came to the election of senators. So all of those things, were issues that they were looking to address. Okay. And so the people who did that were labeled muckrakers. And sometimes, obviously the other term is just progressive era reformers. Usually we do a speed dating activity with this. Of course, we're not going to be able to do that live and in person this time, but we are going to do something similar to what we did with our Constitutional Convention. A little bit different because you are going to be creating a specific bio poem about your reformer, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But here is our list of people. Here's our list of reformers. Some names probably look familiar, like Jacob Riis and W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Jane Addams even. I took Susan B. Anthony off because we've already talked about her quite a bit, so I took her off. Upton Sinclair might be a name that sounds familiar. John Muir might be a name that sounds familiar. Okay, but all of these were muckrakers or reformers during this time period. On Canvas, on today's sheet for Canvas, it does, there is a place for you to sign up for one of these, and it does give the directions for your bio poem and what you're supposed to be doing for this. Okay, and so you're going to do, as far as for today, you are going to do the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire activities. You're going to pick your reformer and start working on that. And then you also have some homework. So when I'm not having you go ahead and do your speed dating video yet, because I want us to talk about that before you make the video, but you can go ahead and write your bio poem if you want to, according to those directions. And so then on Wednesday, we'll talk about it. And then we're also actually going to move on past Roosevelt on to the next president, which is Taft, and then after him, Woodrow Wilson. And Woodrow Wilson is the one that connects us from the progressive era into World War I. Okay. You are also going to read an excerpt from The Jungle, very famous book written during this time period. In a lot of AP US history classes, they have to read the whole thing. I'm not going to get you to do that. You do have an excerpt, and it's got some discussion questions on it, so I am going to get you to do that for homework. Okay. But that will be on I think that's on your Tuesday document, as well as I'll also put it on the running homework document. Don't forget that your Imperialism DBQ is due. I think we said Tuesday night at midnight. And so you're going to let me know if you have any questions about that. Don't forget, tomorrow, everybody does come in for the ACT. Y'all are taking the ACT tomorrow. So if I haven't seen you in a while, I'd love for you to stop by and say hello. I did talk about how I'm bringing in your edible imperialism activity. If you want to bring that in tomorrow, that's fine. If not, we can work out another time. Okay. Okay. Well, I hope that y'all have a great afternoon. Let me know if you have any questions, and then I will see you back here on Wednesday. Erin will be doing Daily Focus on Wednesday, and I'll see y'all later. Thanks, y'all. Bye.